The wind carried dust across the open plain as the small human outpost stood in the middle of a harsh alien world. The sky was pale orange, and the air smelled faintly of metal from the old machines that worked day and night to keep the walls powered. Inside those walls, soldiers and workers moved quickly, fixing weapons, reinforcing gates, and preparing for the next fight that everyone knew would come. Daniil worked quietly in the repair station. He was not a soldier in the same way as those who guarded the gates, but his job was no less important. He repaired armor, patched energy packs, and kept rifles working. His hands were steady, and his eyes were always focused. Many people said he was too quiet, but they also knew he worked faster than anyone else. That morning, the gates opened for a convoy of wounded soldiers. Some were human, others were not. The battle outside had been brutal. Most of the injured were taken to the medical bay. But one figure caught Daniil's attention. She was tall, her armor blackened and cracked, and her skin had a strange metallic shimmer. Her face was calm, but her steps were heavy. The humans guiding her gave her space, as if unsure whether to treat her like a guest or a prisoner. Her name was Rhina. She was not human. She was a soldier from a species that had once been enemies of Earth. In the last months, their people had fought side by side against a new enemy, but trust was still rare. Many humans still looked at her with suspicion, and she returned the same cold stare. The medical team took her away, but her damaged armor was brought to the repair station. Daniil was given the task of cleaning it. He said nothing and took the armor to his bench. It was heavy and carried dents from energy blasts. Some pieces were cracked, others scorched so badly the surface had turned brittle. He began by removing the dust and burned fragments from the plating. His tools moved carefully as if he was working on something precious. Around him, the noise of the outpost went on, boots hitting the floor, voices shouting orders, the hum of generators. Daniil ignored all of it. He worked on the armor as if it were the only thing in the room. A shadow fell across his bench. Rhina had returned from the medical bay, a faint bandage around her shoulder. She watched him work but said nothing. Her gaze moved over his hands, the tools, the way he treated each piece. "You are fixing it," she said at last. Her voice was low, with a faint edge of curiosity. "That is my job," Daniil replied without looking up. She studied him for a moment. In her world, armor was repaired by machines or by soldiers who only cared about speed, not detail. She was used to rough work, not this slow, patient care. "Why?" she asked. Daniil gave her a quick glance. "Because it is broken." Rhina tilted her head slightly, as if she had expected another answer. She did not speak again. Instead, she stepped closer and watched the way he scraped away the scorch marks, how he polished the edges of the plates so they would not catch on clothing or skin. Hours passed like this. Daniil worked. Rhina stood silently nearby. The day shifted toward evening, the orange sky outside deepening to red. Shadows grew long in the workshop. When the last piece was clean, Daniil set it aside and began to fit the plates back into place. Rhina finally spoke again. "You do not have to do it so well. It will only be damaged again." Daniil's hands did not stop moving. "That does not matter." Her eyes narrowed slightly. She had seen humans fix their own gear quickly and roughly. None had ever shown this level of care for someone not their own kind. In her culture, worth was measured in strength and victories. Those who lost battles were seen as weaker. Their equipment was replaced without thought. Here, in this strange, human outpost, a man she had never spoken to before was treating her armor as if it belonged to someone important. When the repairs were done, Daniil set the armor on the bench. He looked at her for the first time in a steady way. "It is ready." Rhina stepped forward and touched the smooth surface where a deep burn had been. Her fingers paused there. She felt something she had not expected. Respect, not pity. She looked at him and asked, Why are you treating me like I matter? Daniel did not answer. He only picked up his tools and began cleaning the bench. For a moment, she waited. When it became clear he would not speak, she turned and walked away. But the question she had asked remained in her own mind. She could not explain why his silence unsettled her more than an insult would have. Outside, the night winds began to blow, rattling the metal walls of the outpost. Somewhere in the distance, a signal beacon pulsed, warning of enemy movement. The humans prepared for another day of war. Inside the repair station, Daniil placed the armor carefully into a storage rack, ready for when Rena would need it again. He worked alone, his hands steady, his mind quiet. He did not know if she understood why he did what he did. Perhaps she would in time. But for now, in the silence of the workshop, a small bridge had been built between two people from different worlds. It was not made of words or promises, but of simple care and the belief, unspoken, that even in war, every life had value. The morning air was cold in the outpost. A pale light spilled across the narrow walkways, casting long shadows from the walls and towers. The sound of boots echoed on the metal ground as soldiers began their daily routines. Somewhere in the distance, machines hummed, keeping the life support systems alive in the dry air of this alien world. Daniil was already at the repair station, his workbench laid out with tools in neat order. He liked to start before most others were awake. The quiet hours were the best time to work. He could finish more before the noise of the day began. He was tightening the joint of a chest plate when the sound of footsteps approached. They were slow and steady, heavier than a human's steps. He knew who it was before he looked up. Rena stood in the doorway, her repaired armor in her arms. The polished plates caught the pale morning light. Her expression was unreadable, but her gaze was fixed on him. "You fixed it well," she said. Daniil nodded once, then went back to his work. She stepped inside, placing the armor gently on a nearby table. "You worked for hours. You did not need to. It needed to be done," he replied without lifting his head. Rena studied him. She was used to soldiers boasting about their skills or asking for something in return. Daniil did neither. His quiet manner was unusual. She found herself wanting to understand it. "You did not answer my question yesterday," she said. "What question?" he asked, though he already knew. "Why are you treating me like I matter?" Daniil paused, his hand still for a moment. "Because you do," he said simply, then picked up another piece of equipment to work on. Rena frowned slightly. "You do not know me. You do not know what I have done. My people have fought yours. We have taken lives. We have burned cities." "I know," Daniil said. His voice was calm, without anger. "But you are here now, fighting with us. That matters." Her brow furrowed. In her own culture, trust was earned over years of service, and respect was given only to the strong. Here, this human gave it freely, without demand for proof. She could not decide if it was weakness or something else. Before she could reply, a loud tone sounded from the outpost's central tower. It was the warning signal. Soldiers moved quickly through the walkways, heading toward the walls. Rena turned toward the sound. "What is it?" "Scouts," Daniil said, listening to the second tone. "Enemy movement outside the perimeter." She looked toward the gates. "I can fight." "You are still recovering," he said without looking at her. "They will send the ready units first." Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Instead, she followed him to the armory, where several soldiers were collecting weapons. The air was tense. Every face carried the same expression, focused, alert. Captain Holland, a tall human with a scar across his chin, stood near the main console, scanning a map projection. Red dots blinked on the outer edge of the defense grid. They're testing us, Holland said to his officers. Not a full assault, yet. Daniil set to work checking the soldiers' armor, making sure energy packs were charged, straps were tight, and seals were unbroken. He moved quickly but carefully, the same way he had with Rhina's gear. She stood nearby, watching him help each person with the same care he had shown her. It was not just her he treated this way. Every soldier, human or alien, was given equal attention. When he finished with the last soldier, Daniil turned to her. "Stay here until the gates close." "I am not a prisoner," she said sharply. "I did not say you were," he replied. "But the scouts are fast. If they break through, you should be ready inside, not caught outside." His tone was not commanding, just steady. It made her pause. Most humans would bark orders at her. Daniil simply told her what made sense. The gates opened for a patrol to move out. Dust swirled into the air as the team disappeared beyond the walls. The gates closed again with a deep metallic clang. Hours passed. Rena stayed near the armory, listening to the distant sounds of movement beyond the walls. The scouts never attacked, but their presence kept the outpost tense. When the patrol returned, carrying damaged equipment, Daniil went straight to work again. Some armor plates were bent from impact, others burned from energy blasts. He repaired them all without complaint. "You do not slow down," Rhina said as she watched him. "Work does not stop because I am tired," he answered. Her gaze moved over the room. Humans and aliens worked side by side here, something that would have been unthinkable not long ago. And at the center of it all was a quiet man who treated every piece of armor, every weapon, and every person with the same steady care. When the repairs were done and the patrol was dismissed, Rhina picked up her armor and turned to leave. But before she reached the door, she looked back at him. "You think everyone matters," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," Daniil replied. "Even your enemies?" "If they are willing to stand beside us," he said, meeting her gaze. "Then yes." She did not answer. Instead, she walked out into the cold night air. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of dust and metal. Somewhere beyond the walls, the enemy was still out there, watching, waiting. Rhina had been a soldier for many years. She had seen many kinds of warriors, but she had never met one like Daniil, who fought not with weapons, but with the quiet belief that everyone was worth saving. She was not sure if that belief would keep him alive in this war. But she could not deny that it made him different. The day began with a strange stillness. No wind moved across the plain, and the sky above the outpost hung heavy and pale. It was the kind of quiet that made soldiers uneasy. Every sound inside the walls seemed sharper, the clank of tools, the low voices of guards on the towers, the hum of the generators. Daniil was in the repair station again, checking the seals on a set of gauntlets. Rhina stood nearby, her armor now fully restored but not yet worn. She had been told to rest, yet she stayed close to the workshop, as if the quiet work there steadied her thoughts. The calm broke when the alarm signal echoed through the outpost. This was not the short tone of a scout sighting. This was the longer, steady tone that meant an enemy force had been confirmed. Within moments, soldiers moved with purpose toward the walls. Voices called out orders. The gates stayed closed, but the watchtowers were alive with movement. Daniil set down the gauntlets and looked at the nearest monitor on the wall. The image showed shapes moving beyond the defense grid, dark forms slipping between the low hills. "They are closer this time," Rhina said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes watched the screen with sharp focus. "Yes," Daniil replied. He moved to gather tools and emergency supplies. "This is not a test. They are measuring the walls, seeing how we react." She reached for her armor, fitting the chest plate in place. "Then I should be on the wall with the others." "You still have injuries," he said without looking at her. I can still fight. Daniil glanced at her but said nothing more. Instead, he handed her a fresh energy pack for her weapon. It was not permission, but it was not refusal either. The two walked toward the armory where soldiers lined up for last checks. Daniil moved between them, adjusting straps, locking joints, and making sure each soldier's gear was battle-ready. He worked without hurry but with a speed that came from long practice. Rhina noticed something. He spoke to every soldier, not in commands but in short, calm reminders. He fixed loose straps and cleaned the dust from visor lenses. His presence seemed to steady the others. When it was her turn, he checked the seal on her chest plate and secured the lock on her shoulder guard. Stay close to the inner wall if you join the fight, he said. I have been in more battles than you can count, she replied. I believe you, he said, but that does not mean I want you taking the first hit. Before she could answer, the gate commander's voice came through the comm system. Positions ready. Enemy sighted at 160 meters. The soldiers moved into place on the walls. The air outside the outpost seemed to thicken, the stillness turning into a slow, heavy tension. Rhina climbed the nearest stair to the wall's edge. From there, she saw them. Tall figures in dark armor, moving with a strange, almost insect-like rhythm. Their armor shimmered in patches, bending the light. They carried weapons unlike human rifles, long and curved with energy cells that glowed faintly. A human lieutenant near her gave the signal. The first volley of fire cut across the plain, bright streaks of energy striking the enemy line. The dark-armored figures spread out, some dropping low, others returning fire. The sound filled the air, sharp and unbroken. Rhina fired from her position, her shots striking with precision. She moved with the control of a trained soldier, each motion deliberate. Below, Daniil stayed near the armory entrance, ready to repair damaged gear or replace spent energy cells. When a soldier came down with a cracked shoulder plate, Daniil worked on it without asking for details of the fight. The soldier went back out within minutes. The battle on the wall lasted less than an hour. The enemy did not press the attack fully. After testing the defenses, they retreated into the hills, leaving the outpost tense but standing. As the gates closed again and the alarm tones stopped, the outpost seemed to breathe for the first time all day. Rhina came down from the wall, her weapon still warm from firing. She found Daniil sorting damaged armor into piles for repair. They were not trying to take the outpost, she said. No, he agreed. They were watching, learning. She looked toward the hills where the enemy had vanished. They will come again. Yes. Daniil kept working, and we will be ready again. Rhina watched him for a moment. You worked on every soldier's gear without pause, even when the enemy was close. That is my part in the fight, he said simply. If their armor fails, they fall. If it holds, they stand. That is enough reason for me to keep working. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in thought. In her own army, armorers were seen as tools, replaceable and unimportant compared to warriors. Here, Daniil acted as though every person's survival rested in his hands. And in a way, she realized, it did. You think this will be enough when they come in force? She asked. Daniil met her gaze for a moment before answering. No, but I think how we stand together will be. There was no pride in his tone, only certainty. Rhina found herself without a reply. She turned and walked out into the open yard, the cold air brushing against her skin. Above, the towers kept watch. Beyond the walls, the hills lay quiet again, but it was the kind of quiet that hid danger. Inside the outpost, the soldiers returned to their duties. Repairs were made. Weapons recharged and supplies checked. The war had not ended. It had only paused. Night settled over the outpost like a heavy blanket. The orange glow of the horizon faded into the deep blue of this alien sky. The walls were lit by the steady beams of mounted lamps, casting long shadows on the ground below. Somewhere in the distance, a cold wind moved across the plain, whispering against the metal gates. Daniil was still at his bench in the repair station. His tools lay neatly in a row, and a half-finished shoulder plate rested under the lamp. He had been working for hours, fixing damage from the earlier fight. The hum of the machines and the faint tapping of his tools were the only sounds in the quiet room. The door opened, and Rhina stepped inside. She was wearing her armor now, not for battle but for comfort, as if the weight of it felt familiar to her. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him work. "You are here late," she said. "I usually am," Daniil replied without looking up. "There is always more to repair." She stepped closer, her boots clicking on the floor. "Most soldiers are resting. You could rest too." He shook his head slightly. "If I rest now, something might be left unfinished when it is needed most." She studied him. The light from the lamp caught the side of his face, showing lines of focus but no sign of exhaustion. "You work as if every piece of armor is more than just metal," she said. "It is," he answered. He placed the finished plate on the side table and picked up another piece. Rhina crossed her arms, leaning against the wall. "I asked you something before. You gave me no answer worth keeping." "What was it?" he asked, though his hands kept moving. "Why are you treating me like I matter?" Daniil paused this time. He set down his tool and looked at her fully. "Because you do," he said again. But his tone carried more weight now. She tilted her head slightly. "You give that answer too easily. You do not know what I have done, or how my people have fought yours. You should have no reason to care." "I have one reason," Daniil said quietly. "You are here. You are alive. And you are fighting beside us now. That is enough for me." Rhina frowned. "In my army, worth is earned in blood. No one gives it freely. It is taken, proved. Here you give it without asking anything first." Daniil nodded. "We do ask something. We ask for trust. We ask for loyalty. But those are not things we measure by the past. We measure them by what you choose to do now." Her gaze shifted away for a moment. She thought of the years she had spent in battle, the victories her people had claimed, and the cold way her commanders treated those who faltered. No one had ever told her she mattered simply because she existed. Daniil went back to his work, but his words stayed in her mind. She moved to the bench and picked up one of the smaller tools. "You do not need to help," he said. "I know," she replied, "but I want to see how you do this." For a while, they worked side by side. She watched how he examined each plate, how he tested each joint, making sure it could move without weakness. His hands were careful, almost precise in a way that reminded her of a soldier aiming at a target. As they worked, the distant sound of footsteps on the outer wall reached the workshop. The guards were changing shifts. Somewhere beyond the walls, the enemy was still out there, silent, but watching. "You think your way of fighting is better than mine," Rhina said suddenly. Daniil glanced at her. "I think it is different. And I think it gives us a chance." "A chance to win?" she asked. "A chance to survive," he said. "And a chance to make something worth surviving for." She studied him again. There was no bravado in his words, no claim of superiority. He spoke as if survival was not only about victory, but about the way people stood together. When they finished the last piece, Daniil set the tools aside and leaned back slightly. "There," he said, "ready for tomorrow." Rhina touched the newly repaired plate. "In my army, this work would be done by machines. It would be faster, but no one would care how well it was done." "Then maybe that is the difference," Daniil said. "We care about the people who wear the armor, not just the fight they go into." She said nothing for a long moment. Then she nodded once, a small gesture but one that felt significant. Outside, the night deepened. The cold wind rose again, brushing against the walls with a faint metallic sound. The lamps burned steadily, holding back the darkness. Rhina stepped toward the door, then paused and looked back at him. "When you treat someone like they matter, do you expect them to believe it right away?" "No," Daniel replied. "Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it takes the right moment. But if you mean it, they will see it." She held his gaze for a second longer before turning and leaving the workshop. Daniel returned to his bench, but his mind was not entirely on the tools anymore. He knew she was starting to see what he meant, even if she did not admit it yet. And somewhere in the cold night air, Rhina walked the length of the wall, her thoughts quiet but restless. She had been given many orders in her life, but never had. She'd been given respect without having to fight for it. She did not yet know what to do with it. The outpost was calm for now, but the war was far from over. Somewhere beyond the hills, the enemy was preparing. And here, inside these walls, an unlikely bond had begun to form. One built not on shared history, but on the simple belief that even in the darkest times, some things were worth protecting. The first sign came before sunrise. A low tremor passed through the ground, so faint that only the guards on the walls noticed at first. The sky was still dark, but the horizon carried a strange glow that did not belong to the sun. Within minutes, the alarm rang across the outpost. Soldiers rushed to their stations, pulling on armor and grabbing weapons. Orders echoed from the command tower. This time, it was not scouts. This was an army. Daniel was already awake, standing at his workbench, with a half-repaired chest plate. The moment the alarm sounded, he set it aside and began preparing spare gear and energy cells. His mind worked in a clear, practiced rhythm. The fight would be long, equipment would break, people would get hurt. His job was to make sure nothing failed because of poor preparation. Rhina entered the workshop fully armored. Her visor was lifted, revealing sharp, focused eyes. "They are coming in force," she said. "I know," Daniel replied, handing her 2 spare energy packs. "Stay with a squad. Watch the corners of the wall. That is where they will test first." She nodded once, fastening the packs to her belt. "And you?" "I will be where I always am," he said, lifting a crate of replacement armor plates. "Ready when someone needs me." The gates stayed shut, but the watchtowers were alive with movement. The glow on the horizon grew brighter until the enemy came into view, rows of dark-armored soldiers moving in steady formation. Their weapons glimmered with cold light, and their armor reflected the faint pre-dawn glow like shifting water. The first wave hit the walls with a crash of energy fire. Beams cut through the darkness, striking the outer shields of the outpost. The shields held, but each hit made the power grid strain. On the wall, Rhina fired from her position, each shot precise. She moved with the same control she had shown before, but this time, there was a difference. She fought beside humans, her back to theirs, covering them as they reloaded. She called warnings when enemy soldiers tried to climb the wall. Her voice carried the same authority as any officer, and the humans obeyed without question. Below, Daniel worked without pause. Soldiers ran to him with cracked plates, drained weapons, and burned-out power cells. He replaced what was broken, patched what could be saved, and sent them back into the fight. His hands were quick, but his eyes stayed calm. The battle roared on. The enemy sent wave after wave, forcing the defenders to shift positions constantly. The air filled with the smell of heated metal and scorched dust. A sudden explosion shook the west wall. Part of the shield there flickered, leaving a gap. Enemy soldiers surged toward it. Rhina was already moving, leaping down the stairs and sprinting toward the breach. 3 humans followed her without hesitation. They reached the gap just as the first enemy soldier climbed through. Rhina's blade met the intruder with a sharp, precise strike. She blocked another, then fired into the chest of a third. The humans fought at her side, their movements unplanned but in perfect rhythm. For a moment, it was not human and alien. It was one line of defense holding the wall together. Daniil saw the fight from below. He grabbed a reinforced shield plate and ran toward the breach. Energy fire struck the ground around him, but he kept moving. When he reached the wall, he shoved the plate into place, sealing the gap enough for the shield to recover. Rena glanced down and saw him there. "You should not be this close," she called over the noise. "You should not have a broken wall," he answered. Another wave struck. Daniel retreated just enough to keep working while the soldiers above held the line. When the shield flickered back to full strength, he moved on to the next point of damage without stopping. The siege dragged into daylight. The enemy showed no sign of leaving, but the defenders refused to give ground. Every time a section weakened, someone stepped in to hold it. Every time a soldier was wounded, another filled their place. By midday, the enemy pulled back slightly, regrouping beyond the hills. The outpost was battered but still standing. Rena climbed down from the wall, her armor marked with fresh burns. She found Daniel near the repair station, surrounded by broken gear. He was already working on the next set of replacements. "You were in the middle of the fight," she said. "So were you," he replied without looking up. She stepped closer. "You should not be able to fight and repair at the same time, yet you do." "Why?" Daniil tightened a strap and set the armor aside. "Because if the wall falls, everyone falls. I do what I can to stop that." She watched him for a long moment. The memory of their earlier talks came back to her, his quiet belief that every person mattered, his calm way of standing in the fight without a weapon in hand. "You risk yourself for soldiers you barely know," she said. "I risk myself for people who are here," he corrected. "That is enough." Rena said nothing. She understood now that he was not simply performing a duty. His actions came from choice, and that choice was rooted in something her own commanders would never understand. The rest of the day was spent repairing damage and preparing for the next attack. Everyone knew the enemy had only paused. The war would return to their gates soon. As the sun sank again, the outpost glowed under the light of its lamps. The walls stood firm, the shields repaired, the soldiers ready. Somewhere in the distance, the enemy waited. The sun had barely risen when the alarm sounded again. This time, the warning tone carried urgency. The enemy had returned, larger and faster than before. Dust rose along the horizon as hundreds of dark-armored figures advanced toward the outpost. Rena tightened her armor straps, feeling the weight of her weapons and energy packs. Every muscle in her body was tense, ready for movement. She glanced at Daniil, who stood in the repair station surrounded by crates of armor and replacement parts. His calmness contrasted sharply with the growing chaos outside. "They are more than before," she said. "I know," Daniil replied. He checked the joints on a new set of plates and handed a soldier a replacement chest guard. "Be ready. Stay aware. Help where you are needed most." The gates opened for the patrols, and soldiers ran to their stations along the walls. Rena joined a squad near the eastern rampart. The first shots rang out as enemy soldiers surged forward. Energy beams struck the shields, causing sparks and temporary flickers in the defensive grids. Rena fired at the attackers, her aim precise and controlled. Humans and aliens around her moved in unison, covering each other and calling out warnings. For the first time, she felt a strange sense of unity. Each action connected to another, every life counted, and everyone mattered. Below, Daniil worked, as fast as ever. Soldiers came to him with cracked armor, spent energy cells, and broken weapons. He replaced and repaired without hesitation, sending them back into the fight. Sweat ran down his face, but he never slowed. Suddenly, a large section of the wall began to falter. A concentrated enemy attack had weakened the shields, and several soldiers struggled to hold their ground. The outpost commander's voice echoed across the comm system. "Section 8 is under pressure. We need reinforcements." Rhina looked at the crumbling wall. "I can help," she said, stepping forward. "You are injured," a human beside her shouted. "I will manage," she replied. She ran toward the breach, her boots clanging against the metal walkway. The enemy tried to push through the gap, climbing and firing, but Rhina met them head-on. Her movements were fluid, precise, and deadly. She blocked attacks, struck with energy blades, and covered the soldiers beside her. Humans she had once thought of as strangers now fought like allies, moving in rhythm with her actions. From the repair station, Daniel saw a group of enemy soldiers attempting to flank the wall from below. He grabbed a reinforced shield plate and ran toward the weak point. Energy blasts struck the ground near him, but he kept moving, placing the shield just in time to block the attack. One of the attackers slipped past the barrier and aimed directly at a human soldier. Rhina noticed instantly. Without hesitation, she dove toward the soldier, intercepting the enemy before a single shot could land. Her armor scraped against the wall, sparks flying, but she pushed forward. In the chaos, Daniel was struck by a small energy blast while helping another soldier. He stumbled but caught himself on a crate of replacement plates. Rhina saw him from above. Her chest tightened, and for the first time she felt a clear choice to make. The enemy regrouped for another push. Retreat was possible. A narrow escape. Route had opened through the southern gate, a way to get off the battlefield unharmed. Most soldiers would take it if given a chance. Rhina looked down at the path. Her instincts screamed for survival, yet her eyes moved to Daniil. He was still working, still steady, still repairing armor even while under fire. He had risked himself countless times to protect others. She clenched her fists. "I cannot leave." "Him," she whispered. With that, she returned to the wall instead of running to safety. She moved to cover Daniil and the soldiers repairing nearby shields. Her energy packs were low and her armor was scorched in places, but she pushed forward, striking enemies before they could reach her allies. Daniil noticed her presence and managed. A small nod, almost like a silent acknowledgement of her choice. Together, they held the critical section of the wall, blocking every enemy attempt to breach it. The humans nearby moved with renewed confidence. Inspired by her courage and the quiet bravery of the man she protected, hours passed in a blur of action. The enemy continued to strike relentlessly, but every wave was met with steadfast defense. Rhina's skills and determination proved vital, while Daniil's steady hands kept every soldier's gear functioning at its best. By midday, the enemy began to pull back, realizing the outpost would not fall easily. Their formations faltered, and retreat became inevitable. The outpost, though battered, had survived another attack. Rhina collapsed against the wall for a moment, catching her breath. Her armor was scorched and scratched, her hands shaking slightly, but her eyes still held determination. Daniil approached her, carrying a small crate of repaired gear. "You chose to stay," he said quietly. "I could not leave you," she replied. Her voice carried the weight of truth, not just words. "Not after everything you have done for everyone here." Daniil nodded, placing the crate down. "It was your choice to fight. That matters." She looked around at the soldiers repairing their stations, adjusting their armor and reloading weapons. She had fought beside them, covered them, and now understood what Daniil had meant about every life having value. For the first time, she felt the difference between her old army and these humans. In her past, victories were measured by numbers killed and land conquered. Here, victories were measured by survival, unity, and the courage to protect one another. As the sun climbed higher, the outpost returned to cautious activity. Repairs continued. Soldiers rested briefly, and Daniil returned to his bench to finish fixing the remaining damaged armor. Rhina remained close by, helping where she could, observing, learning, and understanding. In the quiet moments, she looked at him. Again. "I think I understand now," she said softly. Daniil glanced up. "Understand what?" "That why you treat people like they matter. It is not about orders or duty. It is about choice and trust, and about what we protect, not just what we destroy." Smiled faintly. "You see it because you fought beside us, not just watched." Rhina nodded. She felt something she had never felt in battles before. A quiet connection, not just to Daniil, but to the humans she had once seen as strangers. They were not perfect, but they were willing to stand together. And in that moment, she knew that the war outside the walls was far from over. Yet within the outpost, something stronger had formed, a bond of trust, respect, and shared purpose. Rhina had made her choice, and in doing so, she had begun to understand the true meaning of humanity. The sky over the outpost was a pale blue as dawn spread across the plain. After the long night of attacks, the air was heavy with smoke, dust, and the smell of scorched metal. The walls of the outpost had been damaged, but they stood firm. The soldiers moved among the structures, repairing, cleaning, and checking weapons. Rhina walked along the inner wall, her armor scratched and scorched from the battles, but she carried herself with quiet confidence. Every step reminded her of the choices she had made. She had stayed when she could have fled, fought when she could have rested, and helped protect every soldier in the outpost. And through it all, she had watched Daniil work tirelessly, repairing broken gear and keeping the defenders alive. Daniil was in the repair station, examining a set of gauntlets. He worked quickly, his hands steady despite the chaos that had passed. When a human soldier approached with a cracked shoulder plate, Daniil took it without question and began fixing it. Immediately, his calmness and focus made the soldier feel safer than any orders or speeches could. Rhina stepped into the repair station quietly, placing her hands on the edge of the workbench. "The outpost is still standing," she said. Her voice was low, but carried a mix of relief and pride. Daniil glanced up. "Yes," he replied. "And it will stand as long as we keep working, as long as everyone does their part." She looked around at the crates of repaired armor, the stacks of energy packs, and the soldiers moving efficiently through the station. For the first time, she truly understood the human way of fighting. It was not about strength alone or numbers or even technology. It was about unity, perseverance, and the belief that every person mattered. "I watched you last night," she said. "You risked yourself for everyone." "Why?" Daniil set down the tools and met her gaze. "Because every life matters. Not because of orders, not because of rank, but because they are alive, and I can help keep them that way. That is enough reason for me." Rhina studied him. His words were simple, yet they carried a depth that touched something inside her. In her own army, survival often depended on skill alone, not on the courage to protect others. Here, humans fought for each other, and that made their victories stronger. Outside, the outpost gates opened as patrols returned. The enemy had retreated over the hills, no longer willing to test the walls. The battle was over for now, but the memory of it remained. Soldiers carried supplies, repaired the damage, and checked each other for injuries. Everyone contributed, not because someone told them to, but because they understood that their strength depended on the people beside them. Rhina followed a group of soldiers moving equipment. She stopped to help lift a heavy crate of energy cells. As she worked, she felt a strange sense of belonging. She was no longer just an ally or a visitor. She was part of the outpost, part of the human way of defending life. Daniil approached her with a small pile of repaired armor. "You should rest soon," he said. "You have fought hard." "I will rest," she replied, "but only after I make sure everyone is ready for the next attack." He nodded, a faint smile crossing his face. "That is why you matter. Not just because you fought, but because you continue to stand with them. She looked at him, really looked, and understood something important. Humans did not measure value by victories alone. They measured it by choices, courage, and the willingness to protect each other. And in that moment, she realized that she had begun to think the same way. The morning passed as the outpost repaired and strengthened itself. Soldiers worked together, laughing lightly when mistakes were made, helping each other lift heavy loads, sharing water and food. Rena moved among them, offering assistance and receiving nods of respect. She was learning more than strategy and weapon handling. She was learning the meaning of true unity. By midday, the outpost was fully restored. Every wall, gate, and tower had been checked and reinforced. Weapons were cleaned, armor polished, and energy packs recharged. The soldiers, though tired, were ready to face whatever came next. Rina found Danil once more in the repair station. "I understand now," she said quietly. He looked up from his work. "Understand what?" "That why you treat people like they matter. It is not about rank, orders, or duty alone. It is about life, courage, and the choice to protect it. That is what makes humans strong." Danil smiled faintly. "You see it, because you fought beside us, not just observed. Strength is in action, not words." Rina nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest. She had fought alongside humans and discovered something greater than her own training, greater than her past victories. It was the belief that every life had value, and that together they could face anything. As the sun began to set over the plain, the outpost stood tall and ready. The enemy had been repelled, the soldiers were safe, and the bond between humans and their allies had grown stronger. Rina looked toward the horizon, the hills empty now. She felt pride, not just in victory, but in what she had learned. She had seen humans fight differently, think differently, and care differently. That care had made them stronger than she had imagined. Danil stood beside her, silent but steady. They watched as the outpost continued its quiet activity, each soldier playing a part in the defense and repair. The world outside was still dangerous, but inside these walls, life, courage, and unity had formed a shield stronger than any energy barrier. "You were right," Rina said softly. "It does matter. Every life, every choice." Danil nodded. "And that is why we stand." She smiled faintly, feeling a sense of belonging she had never experienced in her own army. Here humans measured strength not by how many they could defeat, but by how many they could protect. And in that understanding, Rina found her respect for humanity. She had come as a soldier from another world, cautious and suspicious. She had witnessed battles, endured fear, and faced danger. But she had also seen care, courage, and determination that went beyond orders and training. It was not technology, strategy, or sheer skill that made humans remarkable. It was their heart, the choice to protect, to stand together, and to value every life. That was the true power of humanity. As night fell over the outpost, Rina and Danil remained on the wall, looking at the stars. The world was vast and dangerous, but inside the outpost, humans had shown her the strength of their spirit, and she knew, without doubt, that no matter what came next, she would fight beside them, not just as an ally, but as one who had come to understand the true meaning of courage, unity, and humanity. The outpost was quiet now, the soldiers resting, the walls strong. The enemy had retreated, but the memory of the fight remained as a testament to what humans could achieve together. Rina stood taller, her heart steady. She had learned something that no battle manual could teach. She had learned that in every act of care and in every choice to protect another, there was strength beyond imagining.